Dr. Emily Parker had been working in cardiology for 12 years, and she thought she'd seen everything. Heart murmurs, valve problems, irregular rhythms, none of it surprised her anymore. But when Jake Morrison walked into Metro General Hospital that Tuesday afternoon, everything she knew about the human heart got thrown out the window. Jake was just a regular guy. 28 years old, worked construction, loved watching football on weekends, and complained about his coffee being too expensive like everyone else. He looked perfectly healthy, standing there in his worn jeans and work boots, scratching his head like he couldn't figure out why everyone was making such a fuss over him. The accident had happened 3 days earlier. A 2-ton steel beam had fallen from the 4th floor of a construction site and slammed directly into Jake's chest. His co-workers had watched in horror, certain they just witnessed a man die right in front of them. But Jake had simply stood up, brushed the dust off his shirt, and asked if anyone had seen where his hard hat went. His supervisor, a guy named Tommy who'd been in construction for 30 years, had practically dragged Jake to the hospital despite his protests. Emily attached the electrodes to Jake's chest for what felt like the 100th time that day. The monitor flickered to life, and there it was again, that impossible rhythm. Thump thump. Long silence. Thump thump thump. Another pause. Then the pattern repeated. It looked like someone had programmed a broken drum machine and stuck it inside a human chest. "This doesn't hurt at all?" Emily asked, genuinely confused. Jake shrugged. "I feel fine. Better than fine, actually. I've been sleeping great, got tons of energy. Honestly, Doc, I think your machine's busted." Emily had thought the same thing at first. She'd run the tests on 3 different machines. Then 4. Then she'd called in Dr. Robert Foster, the head of cardiology, who'd brought in 2 more specialists. They'd done an MRI, a CT scan, and an echocardiogram. Every single test showed the same impossible truth. Jake Morrison's heart had 5 chambers instead of 4. The muscle fibers weren't arranged in the normal smooth pattern that every human heart had. Instead, they formed geometric structures that looked almost crystalline when you zoomed in close enough. And that rhythm, that weird, stuttering, powerful rhythm, was somehow keeping Jake not just alive but healthier than most marathon runners. By day 3, word had spread through the hospital like wildfire. Nurses found excuses to walk past Jake's room. Interns whispered in the hallways. Someone had leaked the story to a medical forum online, and now Dr. Foster was fielding calls from cardiologists across the country who thought it was either a hoax or the medical discovery of the century. That's when Foster decided to present the case at the International Cardiology Conference. He set up a video link in the hospital's conference room, with Jake sitting right there so the assembled doctors could ask questions directly. Emily stood in the back, watching as hundreds of skeptical faces filled the screen. Foster walked them through the scans, the test results, the impossible anatomy. The audience was silent, then erupted into questions. Is this a genetic mutation? Could it be a tumor that's mimicking cardiac tissue? Has anyone checked for viral modification of his DNA? Then a voice cut through the chaos. Can you play that cardiac rhythm again? Slower this time. Everyone turned to look at the screen. An older man had stood up in the audience, silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a badge that said Professor David Turner, International Space Research Institute. Foster replayed the rhythm. Thump thump. Pause. Thump thump thump. Pause. Turner's face went completely white. He grabbed the microphone with shaking hands. "I need the room cleared. Right now. This is a matter of international security. Dr. Foster, I need a private meeting with you and your team immediately. I'm catching the next flight to your hospital." The conference erupted into confused shouting, but Turner had already disconnected. Foster stood there, looking as confused as everyone else. Emily felt a cold sensation crawl up her spine. She looked at Jake, who'd been sitting quietly through all of this, and saw that his expression had changed. For the first time since he'd arrived, he looked worried. What did he mean, international security? Jake asked quietly. "My heart rhythm is a security threat." Emily didn't have an answer. None of them did. But as she looked at the monitor still displaying that alien rhythm, she realized that Jake Morrison's story was just beginning. Whatever Turner knew, whatever he'd recognized in that cardiac pattern, it was something big enough to make a space research professor fly across the country on a moment's notice. And somehow, Emily knew that nothing would ever be normal again. Professor David Turner arrived at Metro General Hospital exactly 14 hours after that conference call. He didn't look like someone who'd just stepped off a red-eye flight. He looked like someone who'd seen a ghost. He carried a titanium briefcase handcuffed to his wrist and was accompanied by 2 security officers who checked every corner of the conference room before allowing anyone inside. Emily sat at the large oak table next to Jake, who kept fidgeting with his coffee cup. Dr. Foster was there too, along with the hospital's chief administrator who looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. Turner placed the briefcase on the table, entered a code on the biometric lock, and pulled out a thick folder marked with red letters that read Classified, Titan Project. "What you're about to hear cannot leave this room," Turner began, his voice steady but tired. 15 years ago, we sent a deep space mining expedition to Titan, one of Saturn's moons. The mission was supposed to be routine: collect samples, analyze the methane lakes, search for signs of microbial life. What they found instead changed everything we thought we knew about life in the universe. He pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. Emily leaned forward, her breath catching in her throat. The image showed a massive skeleton, partially preserved in what looked like frozen methane. But this wasn't any animal she'd ever seen. It had 4 legs, a long serpentine neck, a skull with massive eye sockets, and wings. Enormous wings that, even folded against the fossilized body, looked like they could have spanned the length of a football field. "We called it the Titan Dragon," Turner continued. "The skeleton measured over 200 meters from nose to tail. The wings, when we calculated their full span, would have been nearly 300 meters across. Whatever this creature was, it was built on a scale that shouldn't be biologically possible." Jake stared at the photograph, his hand unconsciously moving to his chest. "What does this have to do with my heart?" Turner pulled out another document. This one showed a cardiac rhythm chart. Emily recognized it immediately. It was identical to Jake's. Thump thump. Pause. Thump thump thump. Pause. The creature's heart was partially preserved in the methane, Turner explained. The cold had kept some of the tissue intact at a cellular level. When our team analyzed it, they found it had 5 chambers, not 4. The muscle fibers were arranged in these geometric crystalline patterns that allowed for incredibly efficient pumping. This rhythm, he tapped the chart. This exact rhythm generated enough pressure to move oxygenated fluid through a body the size of a commercial airliner. The room was completely silent. Emily could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the distant beep of hospital monitors in the hallway. Jake had gone very still, his eyes fixed on that rhythm chart. "You're saying my heart is the same as that thing's?" Jake's voice was barely a whisper. "Not just similar," Turner said. "Identical. Down to the cellular structure, the chamber configuration, everything. Mr. Morrison, you have a dragon's heart beating in your chest." Dr. Foster cleared his throat. "That's impossible. This has to be convergent evolution, or some kind of genetic anomaly that coincidentally." "We thought that too," Turner interrupted. He pulled out more documents, spreading them across the table. "So we ran every test imaginable. DNA sequencing, carbon dating, isotope analysis. And that's when we discovered something that terrified everyone involved in the project. The dragon cells contain genetic sequences that don't exist anywhere in nature. They were engineered, designed, built by something with technology far beyond anything we possess." Emily felt her scientific worldview crumbling. "You're saying aliens created this creature? Like some kind of biological machine?" "We don't know who created them or why," Turner admitted. "But yes, the dragons, and we believe there were multiple species of them, were constructed. Living spacecraft, maybe. Biological weapons, possibly. We found evidence in the cellular structure of organs that could generate and store massive amounts of thermal energy. Other organs that seemed designed to process solar radiation directly, like photosynthesis but 1,000 times more efficient. This creature didn't need to eat food like we do. It could fly through space, feeding on starlight itself." Jake stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is crazy. I'm a construction worker from Denver. My dad was an electrician, my mom was a teacher. We're as normal as it gets. How the hell do I have alien DNA?" Turner looked at Jake with something that might have been sympathy. "That's what we need to figure out. Because Mr. Morrison, this dragon died on Titan approximately 3 million years ago. But your genetic sequences, we ran a preliminary test on the blood sample Dr. Parker provided, contain fragments that match the Titan dragon's DNA perfectly. Not similar. Not coincidentally alike. Exactly the same." He pulled out one final photograph. This one showed a mountain range, dark and imposing under a cloudy sky. This was taken in the Carpathian Mountains, in what's now Romania. Our team went there last week after we started tracing your family history. Your great-great-great-grandmother came from a village near this location. The village doesn't exist anymore. It was destroyed in 1897 by what survivors called silver fire from heaven. The photograph shifted to show a crater, partially hidden by over a century of plant growth. But Emily could still see the scorched earth, the way the rocks had melted and reformed in strange patterns. We found the same exotic metal compounds in this crater that we found in the Titan dragon's bones, Turner said quietly. Something came to Earth, Mr. Morrison. Something crashed or landed in those mountains over 100 years ago. And somehow, someway, its DNA ended up in your family line. Jake sat back down heavily, his face pale. Emily reached over and squeezed his shoulder. Whatever was happening, whatever impossible truth they were uncovering, Jake didn't have to face it alone. Turner closed the folder and met Jake's eyes. Your heart didn't malfunction, Mr. Morrison. It's working exactly as it was designed to work. The question we need to answer now is why it's activating after being dormant for 4 generations. And what else might be changing inside you? The government facility they took Jake to wasn't technically a prison, but it sure felt like one. They called it a research observation center, which was just a fancy way of saying they wanted to study him like a lab rat. Emily had fought hard to come along as his primary physician, arguing that Jake needed someone he trusted during whatever was about to happen. The truth was, she needed to be there. This was the most incredible medical case in human history, and she wasn't about to miss it. The facility was hidden in the mountains of Colorado, buried so deep underground that Jake joked he could probably dig his way out faster than they could take the elevator up. His room looked normal enough, a bed, a desk, a TV, except for the 6 cameras in the corners and the reinforced walls that could apparently withstand a missile strike. Turner had assured them it was just a precaution. Emily wasn't sure what kind of precaution required 3-foot-thick concrete walls. The changes started on the 4th day. Jake woke up drenched in sweat, convinced he had a fever. Emily rushed in with a thermometer, but when she checked his temperature, it read 102.3 degrees Fahrenheit. She checked again, thinking the thermometer was broken. Same reading. She brought in a different thermometer. Still 102.3. I should be delirious, Jake said, sitting up in bed. I should feel like death. But I feel amazing. I feel like I could run a marathon right now. Emily checked his temperature every hour for the next 2 days. It never dropped below 102 degrees. It never went higher either. His body had simply decided that this was the new normal, and somehow Jake's brain had adjusted instantly. No fever symptoms, no confusion, no discomfort. He was running a temperature that should have required hospitalization, and he felt better than he had in years. Then his eyes changed. Emily noticed it during a routine examination. She was shining a light to check his pupil response when Jake suddenly turned his head toward the corner of the room. "What's that?" he asked, pointing at what looked like an empty spot on the wall. "What's what?" "That heat signature. There's something warm behind the wall, right there. Pipes maybe?" Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She checked with the facility's maintenance team. There was indeed a hot water pipe running through that exact spot in the wall. A pipe that was completely hidden behind several inches of drywall and insulation. They ran vision tests. Jake could now see in infrared, watching heat bloom across surfaces like a thermal camera. But that wasn't all. When they turned off all the lights in the testing room, Jake could still navigate perfectly. He was seeing in ultraviolet too, picking up wavelengths of light that humans shouldn't be able to detect. "It's like someone turned on extra colors," Jake tried to explain. "The world just has more in it than it did before." The physical changes came next, and they were harder to ignore. Emily measured Jake's height and found he'd grown 1.5 inches in 2 weeks. His muscle mass was increasing despite doing no exercise beyond basic walking around his room. His bones showed up denser on X-rays, packed with calcium and minerals in concentrations that should have made them brittle but instead made them incredibly strong. One morning, a guard brought Jake his breakfast and accidentally dropped the metal tray. Jake's hand shot out with impossible speed and caught it before a single piece of toast hit the ground. The guard's eyes went wide, and Jake looked at his own hand like it belonged to someone else. "I didn't even think about it," Jake said quietly. "I just moved." But the change that scared everyone the most happened during a stress test. They had Jake on a treadmill, monitoring his vitals as they increased the speed and incline. His heart rate barely elevated. His breathing stayed steady. Then, without warning, Jake stopped breathing entirely. Emily watched the clock. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Then 5. Jake kept running, his expression calm, not even straining. At 10 minutes, The supervising doctor tried to stop the test, but Jake waved him off. He wasn't gasping, wasn't struggling. He just wasn't breathing. 4 to 7 minutes later, Jake finally took a breath. Just one deep inhale, like someone who'd been swimming underwater and finally surfaced. He stepped off the treadmill and smiled. Sorry, I got distracted. Forgot I was supposed to be breathing. The blood tests afterward showed something that made Emily's hands shake as she read the results. Jake's cells had switched to a completely different type of metabolism. They were processing oxygen when it was available, but when it wasn't, they just adapted. No lactic acid buildup. No cellular damage. His body had figured out how to function perfectly with or without air. His adapting for space, Turner said quietly when he reviewed the data. Every one of these changes, the temperature regulation, the enhanced vision, the ability to go without oxygen, these aren't random. The dragon DNA is rewriting his biology for survival in a vacuum. Emily sat with Jake that evening in his room. He was staring at his hands, flexing his fingers like he was seeing them for the first time. I don't feel human anymore, he admitted. I mean, I'm still me. I still like pizza and bad action movies and complaining about traffic. But my body is becoming something else. Something other. You're still Jake, Emily said firmly. Whatever else you're becoming, you're still you. That's when it happened. Jake opened his mouth to respond, and instead of words, a sound came out. It was deep and resonant, a guttural rumble that seemed to vibrate in Emily's chest. The lights flickered. The coffee cup on the table rattled. And across the room, the stress ball Jake had been squeezing earlier suddenly had a perfectly circular burn mark through its center. They both stared at it. The rubber was still smoking slightly, melted through in a pattern that suggested focused, intense heat. The thermographic cameras that constantly monitored the room showed a spike, a pulse of thermal energy that had reached over 400 degrees Celsius, lasting only a fraction of a second, directed with laser precision. Jake looked at Emily, his eyes wide with shock and something that might have been fear. Did I just breathe fire? Emily couldn't answer. She was too busy trying to figure out how to write this up in a medical report that anyone would ever believe. Jake Morrison, construction worker from Denver, had just become the first human in history to exhale directed thermal energy. The dragons weren't just ancient history. They were waking up inside Jake, one impossible ability at a time. The government's investigation into Jake's family history started the moment Turner mentioned that village in the Carpathian Mountains. They had genealogists, historians, and intelligence analysts working around the clock, digging through old records, birth certificates, immigration documents, anything that could explain how dragon DNA ended up in a construction worker's bloodline. What they found was a trail that got stranger with every discovery. Jake's great-great-great-grandmother was named Anna Morrison, though her maiden name had been Anna Volkov. She'd immigrated to America in 1898, arriving at Ellis Island with nothing but a small bag and a burn scar that covered most of her back. The immigration officer's notes, still preserved in the archives, mentioned that she refused to talk about where the scar came from. She just said fire from heaven and wouldn't elaborate. Anna had come from a village called Drachesti in the Carpathian Mountains. The name literally meant place of dragons in Romanian, though everyone assumed it was just old folklore. The village had been home to about 200 people, most of them farmers and shepherds who'd lived there for generations. Then, in August of 1897, the entire village was destroyed in a single night. The team found newspaper accounts from nearby towns, written in Romanian and German. The descriptions were bizarre and contradictory. Some witnesses said they saw a silver star fall from the sky. Others claimed they heard a sound like thunder that lasted for hours. Everyone agreed on one thing: the fire that consumed Drachesti burned with flames that were silver-white instead of red or orange, and the heat was so intense that people felt it from miles away. Only 12 people survived. Anna Volkov was one of them. According to the records, she'd been found 3 days after the fire, wandering in the mountains, badly burned but alive. When authorities asked her what happened, she told them a story that got her labeled as delusional. She said a star had opened up, and something had come out of it. Something massive and beautiful and terrible. She said it had touched her, and everything had changed. The authorities dismissed it as trauma-induced hallucination. They buried the dead, marked the village as destroyed by wildfire, and tried to forget about it. Anna eventually made her way to America and started a new life. Turner's team had excavated the site 3 weeks ago. What they found wasn't consistent with a wildfire. The crater at the center of the old village was 30 meters across and 15 meters deep. The rocks at the bottom had melted and reformed, with crystalline structures embedded in them. When they analyzed those structures, they found trace elements that didn't exist naturally on Earth. The same exotic metals they'd found in the Titan dragon's bones. But the real breakthrough came from soil samples taken from around the crater. Buried in the dirt, they found fragments of organic material preserved by the unique mineral content. DNA analysis showed it was biological tissue, but not from any known Earth species. It matched the Titan dragon's genetic profile with 97% accuracy. Something crashed there, Turner explained to Jake and Emily in a secure briefing room. We think it was another dragon, possibly injured or dying. And somehow, Anna Volkov came into direct contact with it. Maybe she tried to help it. Maybe it was an accident. But something happened that night that transferred dragon DNA into her body. Emily was pacing now, her scientific mind racing through possibilities. But DNA doesn't just transfer between species like that. You'd need genetic engineering technology decades beyond what we have now. Even if she touched it, even if she was covered in its blood, that wouldn't rewrite her genome. Unless the dragons could do it intentionally, Turner said quietly. We found evidence in the Titan specimen that their cells could produce what we're calling genetic vectors, basically biological nanomachines that could rewrite DNA in real time. If the dragon was dying, if it somehow recognized Anna as compatible, maybe it deliberately passed on its genetic code. A way to ensure its kind wouldn't completely die out. Jake had been quiet through all of this, but now he spoke up. So I'm not human. I'm some kind of hybrid. Part human, part ancient alien dragon. You're human, Emily said firmly. You're just human plus something extra. Anna was your ancestor. She had 5 children, and they all lived normal lives. Your great-grandfather worked in a steel mill. Your grandfather was a carpenter. Your dad was an electrician. The dragon genes were there, dormant, passing down through generations. Until that beam hit me, Jake said, understanding dawning in his eyes. The trauma activated them. Turner nodded. The impact should have killed you. Instead, it triggered a genetic cascade. Your body was faced with catastrophic damage, and the dormant dragon DNA woke up to repair it. And once it started, it couldn't stop. But there was more. Turner pulled up satellite imagery on the briefing room's main screen. 3 locations were marked with red circles, one in the Australian outback, one deep in the Amazon rainforest, and one in Antarctica. These are from the past 6 months, Turner said. 3 separate events where our satellites detected unusual thermal signatures and seismic activity. When we analyzed the data, we found the same pattern at each site. Something entered Earth's atmosphere and landed. Something big. Emily felt her blood run cold. More dragons? We don't know yet. We've sent teams to all 3 sites, but they're remote and dangerous. The Antarctic site is under 2 miles of ice. The Amazon site is in territory controlled by indigenous tribes who've been trying to keep outsiders away. They say their ancestors warned them about sky serpents that sleep beneath the earth. And the Australian site? Turner paused. The Australian site is active. Whatever landed there is generating heat signatures that spike every few hours. Jake stood up and walked to the screen, staring at the 3 marked locations. They're looking for something. Or someone. That's our theory, Turner admitted. We think they might be searching for others like you. Descendants of dragons who've been living as humans. If the activation can happen to you, it could happen to others. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time since this all started, he closed his eyes and just let his mind drift. That's when the dreams came. They weren't his dreams. He knew that immediately. These were memories that belonged to someone, something else. He saw nebulae from a perspective of flight, felt the rush of solar wind across scales that stretched for hundreds of meters. He heard songs in his mind, not in words but in pure emotion and meaning, a chorus of voices that spanned distances measured in light years. The dragons weren't just creatures. They were a civilization. They had culture, language, art. They traveled between stars not in ships but as ships, their bodies designed to navigate the vacuum of space. They fed on solar radiation, bathed in the coronas of stars, and communicated across vast distances through methods that made radio waves look primitive. And they had come to Earth long ago with a purpose. Not to conquer or destroy, but to seed. To leave behind the gift of their existence, woven into the DNA of a young species that showed promise. Humanity had been touched by dragons millions of years ago, and the genetic legacy had remained hidden in the depths of human chromosomes, waiting. Waiting for the right moment. The right people. The right crisis that would trigger the awakening. Jake woke up with tears streaming down his face. He understood now. He wasn't a mistake or an accident. He was exactly what Anna's dying dragon had intended, a bridge between two species, a keeper of ancient knowledge, a guardian born from the union of Earth and stars. The question was, what was he supposed to guard humanity against? The night Jake escaped the facility, there wasn't any dramatic breakout or violent confrontation. There was just a full moon hanging in the Colorado sky, and something ancient responding to its pull. Emily had fallen asleep in the chair beside his monitoring station, exhausted from another 18-hour shift. When she woke up 2 hours later, Jake's bed was empty and the reinforced wall had a perfect human-shaped outline melted through 3 feet of concrete and steel. He hadn't run. He'd simply walked through the wall like it wasn't there. The security footage showed something that made even the most skeptical scientists finally believe. Jake had stood up from his bed, his body beginning to glow with a soft silver light. His skin seemed to shift and shimmer, becoming partially transparent. Then he'd stepped forward, and the wall had offered no resistance. He'd phased through solid matter like a ghost, leaving behind that melted outline as the only evidence he'd been there at all. By the time anyone realized what happened, Jake was already 30 miles away and climbing higher. He didn't really understand how he was doing it. His body just knew. The same way a bird knows how to fly or a fish knows how to swim, Jake's transforming biology understood things his human mind was still trying to grasp. His shoulder blades had split open, not painfully, but naturally, like flowers blooming, and structures unfolded that had been compressed into impossible spaces beneath his skin. Wings. Actual wings made of something that looked like silver membrane stretched over bone, but felt stronger than steel and lighter than silk. His heart's 5th chamber had activated fully now, and he could feel it generating and storing thermal energy at levels that should have burned him from the inside out. But his body wasn't human anymore, not entirely. It could contain heat that would vaporize normal flesh, could channel electromagnetic fields, could manipulate gravity itself in ways that made conventional physics look like kindergarten math. Jake launched himself into the sky, and flying wasn't like any dream he'd ever had. It was better. The air didn't just hold him up, he could feel it, manipulate it, bend it to his will. He rose faster and faster, the ground dropping away below him, the curvature of the earth becoming visible. The atmosphere grew thinner, but he didn't need to breathe. His cells were processing energy directly from the radiation around him, from the moonlight itself. He reached the edge of space in less than 10 minutes, and that's when he saw them. 3 massive shapes hung in orbit beyond the moon, each one the size of an aircraft carrier. But these weren't machines. They were alive. Dragons in their full glory, scales that reflected starlight in colors humans didn't have names for, wings folded against bodies that had crossed galaxies. They were ancient and powerful and beautiful in a way that made Jake's heart ache. And they were waiting for him. The communication that flooded Jake's mind wasn't in words. It was deeper than language, pure meaning transmitted directly from consciousness to consciousness. The 3 dragons welcomed him like a parent welcoming a child who'd finally come home. They showed him visions of the universe as they knew it, thousands of worlds, hundreds of civilizations at various stages of development, and the dragons moving between them all as guardians and guides. They were the galaxy's shepherds, they explained. They seeded life on viable worlds billions of years ago and returned periodically to see what had grown. Earth had been one of their gardens, and humanity's rapid evolution had caught their attention. One of their kind had come to investigate a century ago, fascinated by humans' creativity, their passion, their potential. That dragon had stayed, choosing to become part of humanity's story by leaving behind a genetic legacy. Now Jake carried that legacy, the first human to fully awaken to his dragon heritage. But he wasn't alone. The dragons showed him thermal imagery of Earth's surface with bright spots scattered across continents, thousands of them. Thousands of humans carrying dormant dragon DNA, most of them completely unaware. Some would never activate. Others might awaken gradually over years. A few, like Jake, would transform rapidly when circumstances triggered the cascade. Then the dragons showed him why they'd returned. Images flooded Jake's mind, hostile alien entities moving through the galaxy, viewing emerging civilizations as threats to be eliminated before they could reach the stars. These beings had destroyed dozens of young species, wiping out entire worlds before those civilizations could defend themselves. Earth was on their radar now. Humanity's rapid technological advancement had made them visible, and the hostile entities were coming. The dragons offered Jake a choice, laying it before him with perfect clarity. He could join them among the stars, learning to fully master his abilities, helping to shepherd other young civilizations across the galaxy. He would see wonders beyond human imagination, live for thousands of years, and become something truly beyond Earth. Or he could stay, serving as Earth's guardian and bridge between humanity and the cosmos. It would be harder, lonelier, and more dangerous. But humanity would need protectors in the years ahead, and dragon-human hybrids like Jake might be their best hope for survival. Jake thought about his dad, who taught him how to swing a hammer and always said that good men don't walk away when people need help. He thought about his mom, who'd volunteered at homeless shelters every weekend and believed that everyone deserved someone in their corner. He thought about Emily, who'd fought to treat him as a person instead of a specimen, and Turner, who'd risked his career to tell Jake the truth. He thought about humanity, messy, complicated, frustrating, beautiful humanity, and made his choice. Jake returned to Earth not as a weapon or a lab experiment, but as something new. He appeared on every television screen, every computer monitor, every phone on the planet simultaneously. The dragons had given him that ability, one last gift before they departed to continue their watch over other worlds. He stood in his full dragon form, wings spread wide, scales shimmering silver, eyes glowing within a fire, and spoke in a voice that resonated with harmonics that made people feel the truth of his words in their bones. He told humanity they weren't alone, that they'd never been alone. He explained the dragons, the seeding of Earth, the genetic legacy that ran through thousands of human bloodlines. He warned them about the threats coming from the stars and promised that Earth would have guardians to help face those threats. He asked people not to fear what they were becoming but to embrace the potential that had always been hidden in their DNA. 6 months later, Jake stood on the roof of a building in downtown Denver with Emily and Turner beside him. They'd founded the Dragon Initiative, searching for others with awakening dragon genes and helping them through the transformation. They'd found 43 so far, a teacher in Tokyo whose students had noticed her eyes changing color, a fisherman in Norway who'd survived underwater for an hour when his boat capsized, a college student in Brazil who'd started unconsciously generating heat when she was stressed. Emily had become the chief medical officer, developing protocols for identifying and helping dragon-human hybrids. Turner led the research division, studying dragon biology and preparing humanity for its place in the wider galactic community. And Jake trained the awakening dragons, teaching them control and purpose, preparing them for the day when Earth would need defenders. In orbit, the 3 ancient dragons watched and waited, satisfied. Their youngest sibling had chosen wisely, and Earth's guardians were awakening. The long watch had begun, and humanity was no longer alone in the universe. Jake looked up at the stars and smiled. His heart beat its strange, powerful rhythm, thump-thump, pause, thump-thump-thump, pause, and for the first time in his life, he understood that it had never been beating wrong. It had been beating perfectly for what he was always meant to become.